Well, hello. This is Dan Lutz, and I'm here with Tank.
Hello, everybody.
And we're Dan plus Tank equals Dank. Yeah, I don't know how often we have to repeat this, but I think it's probably good for another year or so. As we keep, waiting for the progress with the Manna World Holding Trust, and we've got a lot of activity coming from. Thomas had a show and answering some questions on the super chat and on the on Telegram, and I have not heard what's going on. Do you want to give us an update where things are? We'll go from there.
Sure. I did speak to Kim today, and for the record, I guess she did say that she has no that Thomas's opinions are his own, and that's not the stance of the trust per se. I addressed a couple things that Thomas brought out because I thought they were important. Paul Yokoyama does not have a sketchy history in any way. Paul charges legal fees. He's been a long time lawyer, and he no longer practices law the same way because he denounced the bar, because that's what we want. We don't want lawyers who are associated with the bar and loyal to something else.
Right.
And but when Paul initially set up his kind of new consulting website, he did put something in there, and he mentioned Manna, and Kim is not a fan of anyone using Manna as a means to sell things. So she did not appreciate that. So and Paul had that taken down within minutes, because he is like Dan, very much, and myself, very much about being in line with the greater mission and purpose associated with the trust. And we're not trying to do anything that makes the trust look bad in any way. And furthermore, I will say this about Paul Yokoyama, that Paul picked up his entire life to move to New York City, to be here to support me, and he has basically done most of his work pro bono, and he has worked very diligently day and night to help us create a structure that allows us to be prepared for what comes after the money comes in. What people may fail to realize is that once the money comes in, it is not the end of this struggle. That is really, in many ways, when the struggle begins, because the people will finally have some substance. And there has to be a plan in place, which we have, and we have talked about exhaustively, that we have to build everything from the ground up, that we have to make sure that the people have ownership of businesses, that there is a way that people can transfer money safely. My goal is to be able to do that, to transfer money within the bank. And that's the goal now. I have told Kim every step of that, every step of the way, every piece of that, everything, to make sure that I am in line. And I have also given her, I have also told her that if I'm doing anything, if there's anything in this that's out of line, please let me know. And she does from time to time. She's told me when I've needed to make a correction or something was off. She's let me know, and she's done that privately because that is really the way that these corrections should take place. And I have um, always, every single time, uh, accommodated her because I have that respect for her and what she's doing, and the role that she plays, and her authority, and I recognize that. I did ask her. We talked about a reference that was made about Dan's credibility in reference to Swiss Indo and this association, distant association with his interactions with Swiss Indo. And Kim very much had an opinion on that as well. She said, now that's just doesn't make sense. Anyone who's been looking to fund humanitarian projects at some point has come across a Chinese elder, a Indonesian elder, someone claiming that they have the new benevolent way. And many of us, and she said even she worked for, you know, like these same people for a time, not realizing who they were. So all of us, anyone who's really been trying to bring in money and funds for projects has had some interaction with them. So it's unfair to say that they are all bad people because they have these interactions. Um, and so she was clear, very clear on that. That there's, that is just not realistic to think that none of us were going to run into these people if we're looking to fund projects because they're the ones who control the money. So she was very clear about that. She had no reservations as far as that goes, and I made
Oh, that's
sure
good to
to
know.
yeah, and I made sure to you know to clarify that directly with Thomas, and I'm sure that's fine, and there's no issue there. You know, Thomas is involved in the fight every single day, and he knows a lot of information, and you know what, this is a battle. It's really hard to you know um, when you're constantly under attack and you're constantly trying to do things that are really simple. I mean, when it comes down to it, Kim also explained to me that, you know, uh, that a lot of what's happening is at the Bilderberg meeting, for example, um, they basically said that 50% of everything from the trust belongs to them. So they're trying to negotiate those terms. So the banks, they waffle back and forth, right? They need money desperately. And so they call Kim, and then they hear the RVs coming, and then they don't call Kim, right? And what they want is they want 50% of the money, to go to them. But Kim knows that if they get it, they'll take it and turn around and give it back to our, um, to these previous trustees and various Dragon families and Rothschilds. And ultimately they could bring it to a legal issue, right? They could launch a legal war, which that would be wonderful because then in a legal battle, there is absolutely no evidence that anything belongs to them. Matter of fact, the things that they're controlling don't belong to them. So and that's so I welcome a legal battle, and that is part of the reason why we put the Guardian of Camelot in place, and we set up trusts so that we are equipped to have such a legal battle. Um, and and Kim said that currently, she's been able to transfer funds, and well, she's been trying to transfer funds, and they gets to the account, and a lot of times they'll get kicked back to, by that credit union, let's say, and the credit union will clear the funds through one of these tier one or tier two banks, and so it's someone there, and they call and they put it back to the Chase Bank or whatever, and that she was able to get it directly to the account, and then it bounced back again. And in some cases, so what she's trying to do is bypass the need, because so there's primary clearing that goes through the federal bank, which the Federal Reserve, which she's already cleared, and then there's the actual clearing at the bank so that we can spend the money. You know, and the banks themselves have actually told the Pentagon that like they will not be allowed to spend the money that's in their account, although it's cleared and there,
Hmm.
and they still are not able to access it. To which I say, what the hell are you talking about, Pentagon? Go in. You have soldiers. Go in and take care of this. It's ridiculous. They're committing treason. But whatever. That's me. How on earth that's even possible? Now, the way the system is set up is that they made it so no one can clear anything without them. right? So there's always, so she just constantly is pressing to put funds through. It gets kicked back for one reason or another. She identifies a new hole. She patches it up and changes it, and she writes it over in this new language. And then, it's kind of like a translation, right? If you've ever translated something into, like Google Translate, right? And you take a statement and then you translate it into another language. And if you have somebody who's fluent in both languages, sometimes the spirit of the message doesn't get through because it translates it directly, right?
Yeah.
So that's part of what she's dealing with. She's just translating things so that they are in line with what she's trying to accomplish. So and she's getting closer every single day, and I would say, that's working its way through as we speak. That's all I can really say on that.
Okay.
And we did talk extensively about some of these other issues with the child trafficking, right? And she gave me some great advice and people to talk to, as far as this is obviously something we need to stop and we need to address it. And one of the issues that I brought up, and this is what I started to talk about last night, is I'm about to activate a movement with the veterans, right? Really the veterans, but everybody can get involved, I suppose, but definitely the veterans. And you remember a few years back, Dan, with the ice bucket challenge, when they had like everybody was
Yeah.
dumb,
Cold
yeah,
water over you as a sign of support, right?
right. So in the same vein, only I'm going to have veterans come on and basically demonstrate their patriotism in some way and whatever props they have there, and have them basically address things. I was talking to Josh Conway. This is kind of something he's going to launch, and basically he's going to reiterate, have the veterans all over the country and possibly all over the world that they have taken an oath of office to defend the Constitution and protect the American people against enemies, both foreign and domestic. And then, just to give an example, they're going to cite some aspect of the Constitution, such as the Constitution says that no state shall impose a law that hinders life in any way, or something like that. That's not right, but and then we're going to cite some of the you know in this case, like say we use that particular aspect of the Constitution. Then the next thing would be to show how the Reproductive Rights Act, it violates the human rights awarded to Americans as part of the Constitution to pursue life, liberty, and happiness, right?
Right.
And essentially, and we're going to read those exact documents from the Reproductive Rights Act to show how that's in violation of that law. And those states don't actually have the right to pass that law because of what it does. And it has nothing to do with women's rights. And then they're going to end it with a statement about being a veteran. So I'm going to launch that. I'm going to try to get that to spark, and I have a lot of support from veterans all over the country already. We have roughly about right now about 200,000, a network of about 200,000 veterans who are ready to activate that, and I think that will start a bit of a stir. And we did have one of the reports from the Speak Project somehow broke through the matrix and has managed to go viral.
Oh, really? Wow.
Yep. Yep. So the interview that I just did with Michelle Walker, the last one I think was on Wednesday, that one is blown up as well. And the basic report I put out there about Linda Collins Smith, basically explaining what she was involved with. So we got contacted by InfoWars and some other groups that want to talk to us and want to talk to Michelle and want to know what sources we have and what we're citing, and we're more than happy to provide that to make sure that the truth gets out. We are not, I am certainly not tied to trying to be a broadcaster or be famous in any way. But what I am tied to is liberating humanity, and however we have to do that within the actual laws, not the nonsense that they're surrounding us with. I'm about that. Oh yeah, and I also asked him about these, these agencies that are really they're private agencies, and they are funded by federal funds, right? And that includes the IR. I mean, just off the top of my head, that includes the IRS, the CDC, the FDA, Child Protective Services. What else? The Federal Reserve used to, but of course they're pretty much extinct at this point. And these different organizations, which are all private organizations. So I meant to call him back today, but I do have a constitutional expert who's going to show me how that is in violation of the Constitution as well. And I think when we put these things out there in black and white and show people that these various organizations are not anything to do really with our government whatsoever, I mean, yet somehow we fund them, then maybe it'll start to spark people to realize what's going on. So that's my report, man. That's my report.
Well, there's a lot there. Let me, address the Swiss Indo side of what, my involvement. And, I looked at Swiss Indo for information, when I first started with the global currency reset, and I'm going on my way to China. I went there for research. I had no idea who they are. All I knew is that they were talking about the global immunity for dealing with historical bonds. And so no one else, that I could find actually, had any information about it. So I spent my time to go there and learned a lot of information about the existing financial system, how it was set up. And there was a very big spiritual component to that for me. And that had to do with, I have a tendency just to go where, my gut tells me to go. My spirit is pulling me to do something. And, and when I ignore that, I end up, spinning in circles or knocking my head against the wall, and so I've learned to follow the path. And then I'll see a bunch of synchronicities. And I also have things that tell me that this is what I need to do. And I literally, and very briefly, I had this shirt that I took with me when I packed my bags to come to the Philippines before I went to Laos to meet with Swiss Indo. And that shirt was something I wouldn't have brought. I resisted bringing it. And I actually, when I was leaving for the airport, had my daughter go back to the house, and I literally picked up the shirt and threw it in my bag, and only wore it that one time when I went to go meet with the head of Swiss Indo, Bapak Suki, also known as Mr. Sino AS. Right? And and he said, the first thing is that, he commented on the shirt, and he said, the only reason I'm sitting in front of him is because, God put me in front of him. And I agreed. And, I told him the story about the shirt because the shirt had elephants on it. And for him, that meant a good sign. Mm. Now, I did a series of interviews with him after that and brought out information. I got exposed to OMD and who they were from that information and finding out what it is. And I also know there's two different names of OMD, doing two different things. But the the story and everything that happened there, I've learned a lot of details. I never reveal that information because it's not really relevant. Nothing that I saw there was, looked like it was a plan of the cabal. Could it have been? Could it be, one of the, Chinese elders behind the scenes and trying to put this out front to make this be the one? I don't know, but I do know that I got a lot of information, and over a 4-month period, I took several trips to there. And we brought in someone to shoot video, and we edited this. And it's also the first time I saw that I had a viral video, right? And it was going to 86,000 views in 3 days, and then it was 4,000 views an hour going up, and it dropped to 0, right? And 200 views an hour. So, and then my bank accounts got shut down. So, and like, well, all my business accounts got up from 4 different banks, I think it was, maybe it's 3 or 4 different banks sent messages all at the same time, closing my accounts. No one could tell me the reason why. So, but after those 4 months, I never went back to Swiss Indo because I was now going back and forth to China, learning about what's going on in China and historical assets. I sort of kept tabs on what was going on with Swiss Indo because people, would contact me, and I'm interested to know. And from what I saw, the people there were trying to pay off the world debt in 11 payments, right? And they were, creating systems, and they were having some success in writing off mortgages in Indonesia. I applaud them for all their success, right? But whoever the elders that I met in China, right? The descendant of Chiang Kai-shek, that white dragon family side. This is just information I've come together to know and build what the financial system of the world was like. I haven't seen anyone in the Swiss Indo group since I left there. It's like 3.5 years ago, something like that. I was there for 4 months and never went back. But I do appreciate everything they were doing, and I don't even know how their success has gone or not gone. I'm not really keeping tabs, but I know that the path that I was on was the correct path. It was in direction. It wasn't. Swiss Indo obviously was not my destination. It was just one of the stops along the way. And along the way, I also saw what was going on with OPPT, Heather Antushi Jaffa, and with them using the Treasury Direct accounts and how that all works, and the fractionalized trust, and so again, it's seeing what they're doing, trying to figure out the pieces is all about learning about the system.
Absolutely.
Listening to Thomas and learning about what was going on with the trust, and having it coincide with the other things, and then also it gave me the idea to understand the difference between what was going on in the GCR and what was actually going on in payments being made into the U.S. government. So this is just all learning, right? And how do you move forward? Gathering the information, gathering people. I've met a lot of people involved all over the world dealing with, trying to make something happen, trying to move in a positive direction. And that's what is important, And then I didn't see what Thomas had to say. And I really appreciate Thomas a lot for everything all the information he's put together. Whatever his opinions are or something, I'm sure he has his reasons for it. It doesn't mean that I don't believe he has good information about and good directions and good intentions, right? And maybe he just doesn't understand about my side, and that's okay. Things happen, and but the most important thing is to come together and figure out what's important and focus on those things. And I know Thomas has said that a lot. So
yep. No, I mean, at the end of the day, this whole movement with the Guardian of Camelot has always been about, let's get people focused on what matters, right? And I believe in that. Protecting the lives of infants, newborns born alive, to me is important. You know what? Matter of fact, it's important to all of mankind, right? They're trying to break our natural connection with life, right? Kim did tell me too that the human trafficking is so big. Child trafficking, it's a $1 trillion industry, and she's a multi-trillion-dollar industry in the United States, or not in the United States, excuse me, worldwide, right? Massive. It's everywhere. So, what's happening with Child Protective Services really, in my opinion, is an absolute abomination. And it really is, it speaks volumes to what is really taking place, because this is a massive industry, right? This is a massive, massive industry. And you have to believe that on some level, there's lots and lots of people that for this to keep going on, there's so many people that are involved, right? And it just seems that whenever someone tries to speak up, they get taken out, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I'm of the opinion that they are really powerless and impotent because only powerless, impotent people would impose their will to damage a child the way they do. So I refuse to be intimidated, afraid, or even hardly acknowledge their uselessness. My main focus right now is how do we disrupt this federal grant lending system that is funding the abduction of our children? Now, as far as I can tell, I got about 200,000 veterans that are ready to activate on that, right? And I'll bet you when I start talking to more and more, I start to bring this to the attention of these veterans more and more. I guarantee you, these veterans who are um, trained to defend the Constitution and defend this country will recognize that it is unconstitutional. Now, I need to cite the specifics, but it's unconstitutional to have federal funding for an independent organization based on how many children they take and to incentivize the employees based on how many children they have in custody. And this is what Diane Schultz, I believe her name is, the former senator down in, is it Georgia? What
Yeah.
she talked about. She said they're incentivizing these people, they're paying the salaries based on how many kids they have in custody. And she said because they need more product to sell. Now, that's what she said. And that was a senator, right? Now, and she conveniently committed suicide, right? Now, I don't care if we put every single person in Child Protective Services out of business, out of a job. I could care less because if they are actively involved in this in some way, they are working for the devil. We are saving their soul by getting them fired. That whole organization needs to be collapsed immediately,
Yeah.
immediately, in every state, every place, because those things it is proven kids are 6 times more likely to there's 6 times more kids that die in child protective services than die in people's homes.
That's amazing.
That's amazing. This
Uh,
is in
it,
clear violation.
and why isn't this on the news?
Oh, well,
Right? Well,
I would
if
imagine some of
that
their
kind,
best customers.
yeah, yeah. Well, I guess it was a rhetorical question, but
Sorry. Yes, I know.
yeah. So, but yeah, it's obvious that this should be on the news. This should be, not existing. It should be collapsed. And I don't, again, when I think about it, I get overwhelmed, and I really, I could start into a very dark place in what I'd want to do with those people. Right? But we do have to stop it. We do have to get into empower those people that are able to get rid of them, and the people that obviously, if people are being Arkansasized, how they call it, suicided,
Arkansas, yeah.
Arkansas, it must be because they're trying to clean up quickly before it gets too late, right? They're trying to cover their tracks. So, and as they say, it's the cover up that always exposes them, right? It shows that that what they've been doing. They have to get rid of this evidence, but
Well,
I don't think it's going to save them.
yeah. It's it's definitely a really um overwhelming reality that we exist in, right? Because and I would encourage people not to be overwhelmed by it. You know, this is not something that is fixed on a government level. This is something that's fixed on a individual and personal level, with many individuals taking a stand for the same cause. Our children are the most precious assets that exist, period. There is nothing in this life that compares to anything you've ever done that is more important than having a child. There's not a parent worth a damn who would not say that the greatest thing in their life that has ever happened to them was the birth of their child. And we cannot take a these beautiful, incredible children with all the power that they have all by themselves before we do anything already power, all of this potential, all of our future and our past wrapped into one little body. You know what? There's just something magical about that. And to, for anyone to think they have the right to snuff that out, they are, um, they have no place. Certainly not in our government. Certainly not protecting, calling themselves protective services when all they are doing in reality is providing pedophile services. And there's documentary out there. Uh, Actually, this group actually it's about Benghazi. It's called 13 Hours. But one of the um, one of the guys in that I'm not sure if he's what his role is exactly, but Kim was talking about it, and um, and I guess he's kind of religious, so I'm not sure if he has a show. His name is um, dang it, it's like something crazy. It's like Jacko Busian, something like that, and he's currently working to eradicate these pedophile rings. And I am going to do everything in my power to reach out to him and discuss how we can really not just stop the events themselves, because we just the manpower to mobilize all the people it would take to do that. It's such an intricate and massive network. Would be very hard. But if we go after everything all at the same time, we go after breaking these up, and at the same time really showing how the laws that are currently allowing these groups to be funded, these private organizations, which are controlled by the United Nations, by the same groups of, elite pedophiles, right? Which I don't even know how you get it. It's like an oxymoron. Um, that so we're gonna try to reach out to him and see if we can get something working. But we will do that, because humanity depends on it, and I can't emphasize that enough. That what they're trying to do is break the heart of humanity. They're trying to break us away from our natural love for our offspring, and that is just we can't allow that to happen. You know? So,
Yeah, yeah, and we are coming together. We are doing things. This is doing these shows. This is helping getting out the information any way we can. Uh, it's how we actually make a difference. And so I encourage everyone to make shows. I encourage everyone to go ahead and spread these links and participate. Help us.
yep,
Right?
I agree. I agree. And you know, uh, I just think it's a, what this is a inspiring time if we just let it be. It's an inspiring time to reconnect
It is.
to the core values of who we are. You know, as a people across the board. I mean, in every country. You know, so I'm excited to make a difference and have an impact. And really get things out there, get people talking about things that actually matter versus the nonsense that we've been consumed with. At the
Right.
end of the day, everybody's consumed with things that just don't matter. I mean, just don't matter. Like I could care less
Oh,
what
did you hear that?
anyone in Hollywood.
Did you hear that when Trump signed this paper? There he's in I guess at the anniversary, the 75th anniversary of D-Day, or something he signed, and they're making a big to do because he signed it at the top of the page, right, instead of at the bottom. Right?
Ah,
What difference does that make? Really, compared to what we're talking about with CPS. You know,
it doesn't matter.
it makes no difference, but that's what they want to talk about.
President Trump did have a great. I mean, the speech was really great, and he did talk about that. That these men lost their lives on the altar of sovereignty and liberty, fighting for our sovereignty and liberty. Um, And, I think that's something that everyone really needs to realize, that the global currency reset is the opportunity to sign back up for your enslavement. That's exactly what it is. That's exactly what it is. And that's what they're trying to get everyone to do. They're trying to get people to buy back into being slaves. Don't do it.
Oh, has the GCR happened yet? I haven't heard anything recently. I'm, you know, I don't call my friends and say, "Hey, did
Yeah.
you get any money yet?"
Yeah. I think, it's funny because I know a lot of people think like, you know, whatever, whoever pays out, I'm going with them. Well, no. If they pay out, it's the catastrophic end of the world. I'm sorry. It just is like, there's no way that serves any of us. So,
So you're going to go with them, right? That's
yeah,
yeah.
I'm not going to go with that. If I was called today and said, "Hey, the exchange center's open," I'm like, "Oh my gosh, they called a hit on me," is what I would think. You know, like
Yeah.
they want me to come down to going to Walmart and go to the exchange centers. Next thing you know, I'll be locked in a cage like a hamster,
Yeah. You get on that
dead.
get on that hamster wheel, right? And it lowers the guillotine.
Oh my gosh, can you imagine?
Oh, yeah,
Well,
a little out there.
they're out. They
Well,
are famous for crazy games. Yeah.
yeah. Hey,
So
David Janda, he had his video, but it wasn't what I was thinking it was going to be about, or anticipating. But what he did reveal was he had interviewed two people that were responsible for a lot of the stuff in the NSA. They were NSA whistleblowers from like 2001, and and they ended up getting their information to Trump's team in Pompeo about the proof that the DNC server was not hacked. There was a leak. Someone moved the data to a thumb drive, and they provided all the forensic data about that. And of course, that being the reason why everyone knew that the Russians were hacking our election was because they hacked the DNC. But that never occurred. That was all a lie. But important information about Russian collusion was passed on by the individual that worked at the DNC, who was Seth Rich, who ended up dead. But he did pass that information to Julian Assange. So that's what the whole interview he was leading up to present this. Now this is basically old information for me. I already knew this, but it's the first time I saw the two individuals, in an interview. So um, I encouraged everyone to go and check that out. But it does, show that we're headed towards where this information is going to become very important to know that the reason to say that the Russian collusion was there was a lie, and now we know that the whole Mueller report is a lie, and they're actually altering. They altered information. Mueller altered information in the report between what was
really,
actually there. Yeah,
I didn't see that.
change the wording to make the wording look worse for Trump.
Oh
Right?
my
It
gosh.
removed like the half of a sentence, right? And they remove this section, the part of the other section, put two sentences together and make them say something completely different. Because the anons are digging and they're comparing, they're reading word for word, and they're trying. So they're going over the entire report and reading. Oh, this is what the actual says over here. They're tracing the information. Right. This is where Mueller got the information, which was all these chat rooms. Right. What kind of evidence is in chat rooms? I mean, go in our chat room right here, and people start saying anything. So here's what: Massachusetts is now 92% Spanish. So I read that right now. That's the truth because it's in our chat room. No, I would say, to think that Massachusetts is now 92% Spanish. I could
That's
never
ridiculous.
believe that. Right? But it's right now in our chat room. It says that. I don't know what
The
the context
Massachusetts
is.
92% Spanish.
That's what it says right there. It's just
That's
by
the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. That's the most
yeah.
ridiculous thing I've ever heard.
And then it says most cannot speak English, and P. Trump mentioned many times in one of the top cities infested with fentanyl. Anyway, but that's what I mean. You read something in a chat room. Now that is the truth. I mean, this is the most perfect example.
Jeez.
It's like it's obviously that Massachusetts is not 92% Spanish, but
No.
yeah. Actually, it just reminded me of something I wanted to tell you earlier. Just a little side note, but because we're talking Massachusetts, it reminded me of Northeast. New Hampshire is the only state in the union that doesn't require you to have an attorney represent you. You can have a lawyer.
Oh.
So you might want to, might be good if Paul, if he needs to file any legal things, he can file it from New Hampshire.
Yes, that's a very good call.
Anyway.
I struggle with this a little bit, because you made a good point the other day about there's a corporation, right? So we have to the republic really has to be reinstated, and President Trump really needs to accept the the actual sovereignty. And I don't know if he has or not, but one thing that really seems like it would be important, right, is, well, if we're going to be sovereign and technically we're still under British control, right? It makes me wonder, like, wouldn't it make sense to make sure you take over your financial institutions right away? Because that seems like the bloodline of the country would kind of come back to, we can't move money because we're under control of a foreign agent.
Yeah, back in the colonial times, each state had its own money, right? And they were actually doing extremely well with their own money, even when they would exchange their money for the neighboring states' money, right? They would exchange their currencies back and forth, their monies back and forth. I don't want to say currencies, but the um, the institutions of each bank there would actually make their own money. The bank would print its own money. And so one bank, its money would be, different from another bank. So it would look different. So this was decentralized money. So at that time, they were actually being very successful. It was this concept of bringing in a centralized bank, or one bank under the United States. So that's where they did the first charter, and then the second charter, right? And the third is literally the Federal Reserve. But then it was hidden because when their charter ran out, they were not renewed each time. Well, why is that?
Right.
Because they were robbing the country, robbing the people. And all the money went to the banks.
Right. That's when the Rothschilds waged the Civil War, right?
Right. And yeah, exactly. Because they proceeded to try and get more separation from England, and they were stopping the attorneys from seizing control. By they made the Titles of Nobility Act. So anyone who was receiving a title of nobility or honor from a foreign government would not be able to hold office. And they literally, that was passed, but it didn't actually get passed until after the Civil War was underway. Because they had to get all the states to ratify it, right? And so it was only during that process that they actually burnt down the Congress and tried to eliminate all the records, because they didn't want that to be part of the United States Constitution. And that's why this whole concept of a new incorporated entity was created so that they could literally also, just control as a corporation. And everyone was under the illusion they're still in a country, but they're really, workers at McDonald's.
Wow.
So you're a citizen, you're an employee of the fast food franchise or the country. So it's just if you step back and think, well, what it actually is, that's not the country. So if the corporation was collapsed, the country is still there. It just happens to be, whether you want to call it in limbo or no one is in their seats, like in Congress or or if you want to take up that the states that went through this process of actually the patriots of those states coming together and say, we're going to redo this, and that did occur, right? And there were people that took the space of governor, and they started doing their own laws. But of course, they're not being. It's hard to exist next to this big monolith and be noticed, right? So I believe Ken Cousins of Pantera de Oro was part of that process. I believe he became, I think, the governor of California in this process. But this happened through, I think they did the original 13 colonies to get them to, so people in each of the original 13 colonies to do something. And they went under the Articles of Confederation. And they did something there. They had all this legal positionings and why they did things in order to reconstitute, because it all came down to when the southern states walked out of Congress without adjourning under Robert's rules. If you never adjourn, you can't start the next meeting up, right? So, and without the quorum, they couldn't adjourn. So it ended up being in limbo at that point, and that's what forced the Abraham Lincoln to create, a means of operating this corporation as the government out of Washington, D.C.
Right.
So, anyway, but yeah, how do we get rid of this, this system, right, and have a new system in place? Or the old system, the old republic in place and seated with individuals. And here's a question: could Donald Trump run for office there under that republic and not under the corporation? Because he's just the president of Trump Incorporated or USA Incorporated. Has nothing to do with the country. So he could literally run for president. And in the republic, there is no rules of just 2 terms for presidents. That was all in the incorporated entity. So,
Wow.
then that would make the Democrats go crazy. Trump, president for life, like Xi Jinping.
Well, that's pretty amazing.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Sorry.
all this stuff. No, I love that stuff because I'm really, what one of the things Kim said today is, what really matters is what we do after the money comes in, right? What are we gonna do? And I've had my focus on that, just like you have. What are we gonna do after, right? Because we know, at this point, we know that the assets of the planet have been held hostage, and they're going to be released at some point here in the near future. And we know, obviously, there's the Bilderberg network of the evil empire that is diligently trying to proclaim that they're the ones that are really in control and it's their money and all this stuff, which is nonsense, right? And even if they were, even if it was their money somehow, it really doesn't matter, because at the end of the day, the fact that your agenda is to eliminate humanity means that we are going. If that was the case, then we'd have to rise up against you, right? So, you know, but so what's going to happen afterwards, right? Like that's really the focus is, what are we going to do? And I think that's really the joy and the beauty of what we get to create, in this next stage. And I think it's really important to dismantle these things in the government, and kind of backtrack and unwind all the nonsense that's been put in place, right? Like you shouldn't be able to completely change what something is by, because you write it in all caps and use the same word and all these little things that they've done to completely change the structure and the beauty of what this government is supposed to be, right? The
Right.
republic should have some kind of integrity. And the fact, I love what you just said too. The republic's still here. It's never gone anywhere, right? It's like,
Yeah.
it's like disco.
How do you bring it back? Where you seat the individuals into government. The elected individuals, and I don't think it should be really the just because you won an election in the incorporated. That you shouldn't. I don't think you should get automatically get to run. To be in there. Someone has to run for those offices. It could be the same people running, but they'd have to run all over again. I also think we should probably just not have any parties, because the parties are only there to divide us. It's just
Right. Well, because first of all, to have a collection of values and say, okay, this is what we stand for. Well, now if you don't agree with any aspect of what that party is, it's like, well, people just kind of vote their party, right?
Yeah.
That's unfortunate. And I think that's, I mean, in reality, it's like, at the end of the day, it's like there's got to be issues that actually matter that are brought up, right? So, if I said it to you like this, if I said, okay, look, we have a terrorist threat and they are poisoning the water supply, we have to stop that. If that's all I told you, and you knew my information was accurate and I was a trusted source, and you knew that was happening, wouldn't our military immediately get involved to stop that? Of course, right? Like every agency, you would think, anyways, right? Like, you would think that's what. Well, that's happening, right? That is happening. You have a terrorist organization that's trying to kill Americans, trying to kill people all over the world using the same methodology, right? We need to act right now. Would you really be so concerned with what's going on, at the border? Would you really be so concerned with lynching, right? Like that's a big issue right now. Like, of course not. You wouldn't care, and that's a problem. It's not that or we think we wouldn't care, but yet here we are having this discussion about things that don't matter constantly and getting all this power to things that are useless that really they affect some small percentage of the population. The only reason why they're smart in this sense, right? They've made this huge controversy around abortion when in reality abortion doesn't affect that much of the population, right? There's not that many people who really are opting into that, right? They're trying to increase the numbers to make that normal. They're trying to make overpopulation an environmental concern, right? So now you have millennials that are like, look, I'm not going to have kids to save the planet. When in reality, it's like you're robbing those kids of their natural right to be human and naturally desire to reproduce themselves. Of course, they want to do that. And there's no correlation between overpopulation and climate change whatsoever. The United Nations says this themselves. But if you say that, people think you're, a flaming idiot, right? Like, what are you talking about? Like, you're so out of touch. But that's the facts. Those are the actual facts. You can find that out on the United Nations website.
Yeah.
So
I was reading, see if we have any questions, and there is one question. It actually was mentioned in the last the front line show as well. The question is: Thomas emphatically stated that Manna was willing to walk away from everything unless the clowns fell in line, going dark. Do you have any intel on that? If that is true?
I did mention that by means of I asked him, I'm like, Thomas said something about the trust basically threatening to shut everything down, to force them to cooperate. And Kim said that the trust is not making any threats, right? Because and that's what she said, right? And because my thought was, well, right now the trust is still clearing everything. It's the trust that's clearing everything, right? On the government level, right? So to get the money even there for the banks to clear it all, that's all happening at the trust level. Now there's another level of clearance, right? So now here's the irony of the asinine behavior of the banks and everybody else who's involved in actively blocking funds from the people. All the Bilderberg, retards that are out there, serving, who want to sign up for the next round of slavery. They're blocking it. Even though Kim is obviously the one clearing it. She's all over it. They keep trying to trip her up, but she's all over everything. So they can't stop her. Now, what Kim said specifically was the trust isn't making that threat. Now, my thought was, well, if the trust went dark and had everything go dark, right? And I'm not sure, Thomas might have meant something else, and I'm not sure exactly what he meant. All I know is that Kim said the trust is not making any threats like that, right? So, and I specifically mentioned that issue, and basically, and I'm not saying that Thomas misrepresented something. He might have been talking about something I don't have the background, and just I can see how that could have come across. Because my thought was this is, well, if you shut everything down, that means you'll still have these same animals that are devouring and cannibalizing the people, both figuratively and literally, right? But they're taking everything we have. So we're the ones that end up suffering still. So they still get to be in power at our expense, right? So obviously that doesn't necessarily serve the people or serve the greater good of the planet in any way. So I don't think that is how it's going down, based on what Kim said. I think I understood her correctly.
Okay. All right. Oh yeah. It didn't seem like that was really something that made sense. As you go all this far, I can see, being quiet. That would be going dark. Is
Oh
fine.
yeah,
I'm sorry. Not giving up. And just throwing in the towel. Say, okay, forget you guys. You guys get yourself together. We'll check you out next year or something.
No, I'm sorry. That might be what Thomas meant. I might have misunderstood too.
Yeah, I mean,
yeah, so,
I don't know what exactly the meaning of that is going to. I did not hear Thomas's show yet, so I'll try and see if I can catch it all today. I have to break it up a little bit, but we'll see.
yeah.
But in any case, we need to still remain focused on what our goals in getting this information out and how do we go about, bringing abundance. And we'll just take our steps one at a time. Well,
Absolutely.
is there anything else you want to cover? I did send the link to Tui. I haven't heard from Tui yet, so I don't know. He's going to be jumping on. But I think we're good for today. Otherwise,
I think so too. I think that was a pretty solid report. And hey, everybody, have a great night and a great Saturday, and onward and upward.
Yeah, we'll see if tomorrow I come on. I'm all fire and brimstones about Thomas. We'll see.
No.
No, I doubt it. But
it's all good. All right, everybody, have a great night. Thanks, Dan.
All right. Good night. Bye-bye, everyone.